Our top focus this hour remains on the tragedy that has struck Nepal in the form of a devastating flash flood near its border with Tibet. At least 165 people have been killed, while hundreds remain missing as entire villages have been swept away by the catastrophic deluge. The floods hit early on Wednesday in Rasua, just north of Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. U.S. Geological Service said that a glacial collapse and debris flow may have caused the impacts downstream towards Sabrubesi and other settlements. And the scale of the destruction, as you can see, is now visible on your screens. Before and after satellite imagery also shows that impact, showing just how dramatically the landscape has been transformed by the flash floods. Well, moving on, a terrifying clip from surveillance video shows a massive wall of mud, as you can see, hitting. People are still running on their screens and crashing over a building several stories high, engulfing it as dozens of people below ran for their lives. A tsunami-like surge of water and mud tore through villages and towns along the paths of two rivers. These are two major rivers of Nepal, the Bhotekoshi and the Trishuli. Trishuli also falls along major highway routes, and the devastation is quite hard to miss. There are huge villages, huge communities that have been affected. Drone footage from Nepal's Nuwako district captured the extent of this devastation, as you can see, showing damaged buildings and thick layers of mud spread along the banks of the Trishuli River. The floods have left behind a landscape of devastation, buildings damaged, roads destroyed, collapsed even. And then there are these videos showing the sheer force of the water. The flash floods, the sheer force ripping a bridge from its supports and carrying it swiftly downriver. In the area hit by the disaster, rescuers are now wading through mud and sludge to look for survivors after the flood waters buried the lower floors of multi-story buildings. Now, many of the missing people are foreign tourists, more than 100 from India and others from Australia, Britain, Malaysia, the Netherlands, Portugal, South Africa, South Korea and the US. That is what we know so far. India sent the first tranche of humanitarian aid. Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier spoke with his Nepal counterpart, Balendra Shah, and conveyed condolences over the loss of lives. He said India is ready to provide all possible humanitarian assistance, demonstrating unflagging solidarity during this time of crisis. Now, China, US and EU are also among the countries that have pledged assistance for dispatched relief supplies. India, too, is on high alert at this moment. It is keeping a close watch on the situation as paramilitary forces have been put on high alert and posted in the border districts of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. For now, the Home Ministry says the water level in Nepal's reservoirs is reducing and the situation is under control. We're now being joined live on this story by Coach Raj Koirala from Kathmandu. He's an editor at Republica Daily. The death toll is rising at this moment. People are missing, Mr. Koirala. What confidence do you have that authorities can still recover the missing, which is perhaps the most cruelest word for friends and families at this moment?
Yeah, thank you for having me. As you rightly mentioned, the death toll has already crossed 165. And, the authorities, security personnel have been mobilized to check if there are any, person, still surviving somewhere trapped in the building. But, most of the buildings have been, inundated and many of them already completely washed away. The possibility of finding, survivors is very slim. Security official, they confess this to us. But, the process of, recovering dead bodies and finding whereabouts of the missing person is a top priority. And today, since the weather has improved, the security personnel have also now already reached to the ground, and they are trying to, excavate and trying to find the missing person. But, the finding, survivors is a slim possibility now.
Mr. Koirala, we know that this happened in a major route for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. People went there for work, business, travel. There were pilgrims, there were trekkers. Do you think they received any warning? Have you received any ground updates from the survivors or the residents of that region?
No, this happened so fast that, even if people just got information about the impending flood, they could not manage to escape. It was just barely a few minutes time, the flood. Also, people didn't expect that the flood would be this much devastating, because the level of water was unprecedented this time. Because there was glacial lake outburst. That's what the people have said, the expert have said. But there were information, but they were trying to run away, like the image that you just played in the TV. That shows that people got information and they tried to run away. They tried to escape, but they had barely a few seconds to actually escape. So many of them, they fell victim. Um, so yes, because earlier, there would be information, but once this information was there, the people living in the downstream of Trishuli River, they were given, information in advance, and so they could just move to the safer location. So we didn't have much human casualty in the downstream of Trishuli River. But this in Botikosi area, like the one of the one of only one operational custom point, this Raswagari point, and you mentioned that there were a lot of Indian tourists. They were also heading to Kailash Manasarovar Yatra. That's the starting point, and from there, they actually take Chinese vehicle and they go to pilgrimage. But they were in the process of getting approval from Chinese immigration authorities. But it was around the same time the flood struck the area, and most of them who were there, and they were actually washed away.
Indeed, Mr. Koirala, we also know that when the waters recede eventually, it's going to be difficult for Nepal to recover, doesn't it? Because Nepal is already struggling politically. It has been struggling politically, and there's a new government. Do you see that confidence in the disaster preparedness system and eventually the recovery process that Nepal is to undertake now?
This is one of the biggest national tragedy we had in several decades. It's bigger than, security personnel who have visited there. They say that the gravity, the extent of the damage is much bigger than 2015 earthquake that Nepal witnessed. And, the settlement, entire settlement have been submerged in the mudslide, and, houses have been swept away. And it's very difficult to retrieve the, dead bodies. So it would be very complicated job, very difficult job. And also in terms of, infrastructure loss, you see, this Botikosi River had around 15 hydropower projects, 12 of them already operational, and remaining others, they were on the final stage of generating electricity. And it has caused billions of worth of, loss in terms of properties. And so it's going to be challenging, because we had Gen Z movement last year, and that caused around 86 billion worth loss of properties in just one day. And we are now struggling to recover. But then again, this tragedy has come, and it will be really difficult for us to recover in terms of this physical damage, and also the number of people killed in this particular case is really high, and we expect that the number of dead will be much more higher than what has already come out.
It's interesting, Mr. Koirala, that you compare this devastation and you call it even worse than the 2015 earthquake that had already shattered several regions of Nepal. And when we talk about the hydropower electricity projects that you say that have been affected at this moment, it is a huge asset for Nepal, isn't it? Because hydroelectricity is what Nepal backs on. It generates a lot of revenue out of it. Do you see this tragedy shaping the future of this hydropower projects as well?
Yes, because India has given us permission to export more than 1,000 megawatt electricity, and currently we were actually exporting large amount of electricity to India. But since this is a rainy season, we have a surplus, so we can somehow manage to meet the domestic demand. But when it comes to export, this will be challenging once the water level in the river recedes, because most of the hydropower projects in Nepal are run-of-the-river project, and once the water level goes down, the production also comes down automatically. So I see, yes, because one of the important source of revenue that is also going to dry up. because these hydropowers projects, they have been completely damaged, and they cannot be repaired anytime soon. It will take a long time, of course.
From what I can deduce from our conversation, Mr. Koirala, urgency, exhaustion, hope, everything is shaping this devastating crisis in Nepal at this moment. Thank you so much for getting us the latest.
Yeah, thank you for having me.